Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another exciting reading. Oh, we're a bit overexposed. Sorry, just sorting out the studio here. Talk amongst yourselves for a second. Let's get back to that camera. You can kind of see what I'm up to. Just sort that out. That's probably better, hopefully. A bit better. It's very bright. I've got the lights in a slightly different arrangement than I normally do. So I'll just check the feedback in a minute. Good afternoon to Adrian. Good afternoon to lovely Julia. Good afternoon to Audrey Forbes Hamilton. Hope you're all jolly and well and doing good stuff. Yeah, I think that's probably bright enough, isn't it? It's a little bit garish in my face. I changed it round for the Vogue show last night, and I haven't changed it back. I've been out filming, so normally I have a light up here which shines down and helps me read the book. Anyway, chin chin. Hello to Ben Reeve, I beg your pardon, to Ed Loud and to Andrew Norris. What ho, he says. Good noonie afters all ye Vobsterers. And finally back into the swing of things after 7 days off work, says Ben Reeve. Well, nice to be back in ye oldie swing of ye oldie things. I don't know where we left off now because I've just... I just opened it up and I thought, wait a minute. Can anyone tell me what page we were on? Well, this is embarrassing. Wait a minute. Just trying to work out where we are. I just had it just then. In for a penny, in for a pound. There we go. Good for you. What was the last thing? There was wood smoke. I knew that there was only like a couple of pages before the end of a certain bit, but it wasn't the end of the chapter. Oh, wait a minute. Time takes revenge even on saints. Didn't we get there? Yeah, I think that's where we got to. Oh no, York. We did York. Sorry about this. I think we got here. Yes. No idea of the page. I've been asleep since then. Oh, start. Yeah, Jonathan Fox. Start again. Good idea. I think we got here. I think we got to this point. We got to the sun sets. The face of the minster is washed by a pink flush from the west. In a few moments, the quiet dusk will be stealing through the streets of York, and Great Peter will solemnly tick another hour from the slate of eternity. That seems to go back and watch yesterday's episode. Yes, this is the BBC, full of repeats. So, yeah, here we go. And if you've just joined us and you don't know what's going on, don't worry, neither do I. We're on chapter... We're coming to a new chapter. Hang on a minute. Aren't we coming? Yeah, we're on chapter 9. We're coming up to chapter 10. So it's all very exciting. Right, that's the place. Marvellous. Okay, can you hear me at the back? Good. Right, now and then, if a man loves a city, he is rewarded with a glimpse of her heart. I was standing by Stonegate, talking to an American who is also in love with York, when down the dark street from the direction of the Minster came, holding the centre of the narrow road, a procession of considerable splendour. First came the chief constable of York, booted and spurred. Then came the town clerk in his robes. Following him was a man wearing a fur-edged cap of the Richard II period, and holding aloft the great sword of the Emperor Sigismund. which always goes before the Lord Mayor of York. His lordship followed in a scarlet gown edged with brown fur. The aldermen walked 2 by 2 in blue robes, chatting, and, strange and beautiful climax to such civic glory, there then came a long line of young orphans, little blue-coat boys and little grey-coat girls, very quiet, grave, impressed. "Well," whispered the American, "what do you know about that?" The Lord Mayor and the Corporation of York, walking in state with a sword and the sword of the Emperor Sigismund, before the regiment of poor little orphans, I gave up and asked a policeman. It's like this," he said. "Every year the Lord Mayor and the Corporation attend a church service with the orphans, and when it's over he gives away prizes to the boys and the girls in the guild hall. That's all." And he should have been Yorkshire, shouldn't he? "Aye, well, every year Lord Mayor and the Corporation attend a church service with the orphans, and when it's over he gives away the prizes to the boys and girls in the guild hall. That's all it is." And is it advertised, officer?" said the American. "People aren't put to it." "What? People aren't put wise to it?" "No, sir. It just happens." "Well, what do you know about that?" said the American. "Here's a great sight going on that hundreds of rubbernecking tourists would pay anything just to see, quietly slipping through the streets as if it happened every day. Gosh, that's just so downed English. I like that. The wonderful thing about England is that you have so much that doesn't need advertising. Say, officer, will they let us in on the ceremony?" I should just walk in if I were you." So we walked into the guild hall, unprepared for the sight that met us there. York Guild Hall is one of the most picturesque halls in England. Its wooden roof is upheld by oak pillars, each one a great tree. The walls glitter with arms. The dim light falls through stained glass. Beneath a canopy on a dais at the far end of the hall sat the Lord Mayor in his scarlet robes. Before him on the table lay the great sword of Sigismund and the silver mace of York. Grouped round the Lord Mayor were the civic dignitaries. Facing them, girls to the left and boys to the right, were quiet, grave little orphans. The sun slanted through the west window behind the Lord Mayor's throne and fell in a coloured pool on the stone floor. We stood rooted to the spot by the marvellous contrast in the scene. The grave old men in their robes, the lovely hall, the glint of swords and pistols on the walls, and the fresh faces of the children. Timidly, 2 little girls in grey print dresses walked out and began to dance in the pool of sunlight. A piano played a simple Morris dance, and the 2 small maids, with their neat little waists, their tight braided hair, their slim little legs in coarse black woolen stockings, passed and repassed, advanced and retreated, smiling with parted lips, blushing at their ordeal, moving gracefully with many a twirl of rat-tail plaits. And the Lord Mayor of York leaned his chin on his hand and looked down gravely over the sword of York, contemplating the sweetest picture I have ever seen in any city in England. So it went on. The little girls danced 2 by 2 or in groups, and the bullet-headed boy orphans gazed on solemnly and applauded wildly after the dance. "There's something in this," whispered the American, "that gets me right in the throat. Suddenly I turned into W.C. Fields. I can't find the words for it. It's good, I whispered back, to think that the Lord Mayor of one of the grandest and oldest cities in the world can give half a day to poor children, not fling them half a day. What? Can give half a day to poor children, not fling them half a day, but devote half a day to them and bring out the city regalia for them. Yeah, and there's something more. I'll tell you, it's one of the finest things I ever hope to see. This is my memory of England. Gee, look at that little ginger-haired girl. The way the light shines through that little mop of hair. I guess they couldn't tie up that bit in a plait. She's just a picture. The piano became silent. The dancers left the room, very pink, to flop into their seats and smooth their print dresses over their knees and look prim and solemn. The Lord Mayor of York rose as a pile of books was carried in, and he made a speech. He told them that York was proud of them, that York looked to them to become good men and women. They must not think that there was any bar to their progress. He turned to the little boys and reminded them that a recent Lord Mayor of York was an orphan. The children, who have no fathers and mothers, sat very still and wide-eyed, listening to the voice of the parent city. The prizes were given. Jenny Jones, prize for the kindness to her juniors. Great applause from the boys. Up walked Jenny, all blushes, curtsied low over the sword and mace of York, and retired, clutching a book to her grey print chest. John Robbins, prize for gardening. Up walked sturdy John, saluted, and retired, clutching a book to his blue brass-buttoned frock coat. A great pile of oranges was planted down beside the sword, with two mazes, full of new minted sixpences. In two long files the orphans of York marched through the pool of sunlight and took from the hands of the Lord Mayor an orange and a sixpence. As the last child walked away, there was a rising up on the dais and the ring of the chief constable's spurs on the stone floor. Up went the old sword of the Emperor Sigismund. Up went the big silver mace glittering in the shaft of light, and, with a rich gleam of scarlet, the Lord Mayor of York, the town clerk, the alderman, rose up and went slowly out into the late afternoon sunlight. The American and I walked out into the ancient glory of York with the feeling that this solemn, friendly old city had shown us great favour by admitting us to its annual children's party. Outside, we encountered a band of busy tourists with their noses in guidebooks. Say, whispered the American, we know more about York now than a guy with a guidebook can know in a million years. And I think that to some extent that's true. We're on chapter 10. Let's have a quick look at the comments. Sunday afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. Hello, must be cold in Sussex. Rich in a denim jacket, it's 30s here, and I'm Sinropa. Yeah, well, I just thought I'd put this on to show my thanks to Jeff Kellison, Killer Kellison, as I now call him, for sending it over to me. He's purchased it for me. And the back room here, funnily enough, it's warm outside, it's very muggy outside, but actually the back room in my house does stay cool, and I was feeling a bit cool. Secret agent, says Tim Williams. On whose side? Ooh, I don't know what that's about. So many orphans. We're on chapter 10. Introduces Americans at Boston, Lincoln and Peterborough, and discovers the smallest and happiest county in England, where men live by the death of foxes and collect horseshoes. Ooh. Cities have as many moods as men or I, might add with cities have many moods as men, or I might add with reverence, women. Some cities hide behind hills and show themselves to the traveller on the high road only at the last moment, as if unwilling to be discovered. You turn a corner and there they are. Other cities prefer to surprise you. They spring out at you from the apparently innocent landscape, while a few, and these are perhaps rare, stand up nakedly against the white sky and call to you from far off. Lincoln is one of these. The city of Lincoln is an island. No, it's not. The city of Lincoln is an inland St. Michael's Mount. St. Michael's Mount is in Cornwall, isn't it? If I remember correctly. The flat, level fenlands, and so he's just comparing it to St. Michael's Mount. Yes, so the city of Lincoln is an inland... The city of Lincoln... So I will get this out. The city of Lincoln is an inland St. Michael's Mount. The flat, level fenlands stretch to the sky like a green and yellow sea, an ocean of grass and wheat. On clear days, the towers of Lincoln Cathedral are visible for 30 miles, and the view of Lincoln on its hill, lying sharply cut against the distant horizon at the end of a Roman road, is one of the characteristic sights of England. It typifies Finland. It is one of those quick-change landscaped acts for which England is so famous, a sign that you have left the north and have entered the flat lands to the east. When I ran through Kirsten in Lindsay, I saw Ermine Street running ahead over 16 miles like a straight tape, and at the end of the road, so small and clear, was Lincoln Hill. Every minute, almost within every second, the towers of the cathedral grew larger at the end of the road, till, at the last mile or so, they filled the sky. And I sang the Legion's marching song about Lalage and Rimini. If you ever wish to imagine yourself in Roman Britain, he does like Roman Britain. He does like the Romans, doesn't he, He keeps reverting back to the Romans. I guess that's because that is part of our history, of course, but he does seem to pick up on that more than anything else. If you wish to imagine yourself in Roman Britain, go to Kirkton and walk these 16 miles with half-shut eyes, and you will see Lindum Colonia. I love the way the Ordnance Survey maps preserves these names in brackets, shining in white stone. I wonder if it still does that, the old Ordnance Survey. Perhaps they did in 1920s. Lincoln is a real limb of Rome, with Ermine Street lying like a sword to the north, and the Fosse Way like a sword southwest. I entered Lincoln at evening. From my bedroom window I have a fine view of the west front of the cathedral in splints. Tall scaffolding covers one of the towers, for this cathedral, like many others, feels its age. When walking around the quaint close, I met a middle-aged man who turned out to be a Londoner on holiday. He had, so he told me, explored the great quartet of cathedrals, Ely, Norwich, Peterborough and Lincoln, which is to the east what Hereford, Worcester and Gloucester are to the south, Midlands. Every man and woman and child in England should spend a holiday studying these two groups. "I'm going back to London with new ideas," said this man, after we'd discussed the weather in great detail. "I always thought that when I got on the pension list, I'd live in a little place somewhere not too far from London, Surbiton perhaps, or even Guildford. Now I want to spend my last days in one of these cathedral cities where I can come in the evening or on a fine afternoon to smoke a pipe in the close. Perhaps you don't know London like I do. The peace of these places just makes you wonder whether London is a dream. No, yeah, you've hit it. Sitting here with the bells, which got on my nerves like blazes at first, but playing a bit of a hymn every quarter of an hour, you know, and the rooks cawing in the trees, and, well, you know, the Dean's geraniums very red under a grey arch, and the sound of the old man mowing grass. Yeah, that's it, yeah. And a high wall round it with the gateways in it. It rests the nerves, doesn't it? And stimulates the imagination? He rapped his pipe on the wall behind and smiled. Well, he said, I've never been able to afford an imagination. You know, that's a luxury. I'm a cashier, and cashiers with imagination, well, they go to jail. I suppose there are millions more like me who have plodded along the same old dreary road of routine, and at first wanting to stop and look over the hedges, and then just carry on plodding along. He refilled his pipe. You feel, I suggested, that within these old walls there is something more important than other people's money that you've handled all your life? He laughed. How did you know? Anyway, I'm going back in 2 days to strap hang all the way from Ealing, and I expect I'll forget it. The cathedral chimes marked the half hour. An ancient canon walked over the grass with a book. I thought the cashier, could one have removed his wing collar and his felt hat, would have made a good monk. Lincoln lies on 2 levels. Old Lincoln, on the hill, has its feet in the past. New Lincoln, behind the hill, made the tanks during the war. That'll be the First World War. One of the most interesting relics in Old Lincoln is Newport Arch, the only Roman town gate still in use in England. I stood before this massive grey gate and watched motor cars run in under the arch, which has admitted the spears of the legions to Lindum. This arch has a little side arch, or needle's eye. I believe many people think of the camel and the eye of a needle quite literally. If so, the Newport Arch will make this biblical reference plain. The town gates in the east were shut at dusk, but the needle's eye was open. A caravan, arriving after the gates were shut, had to camp outside the walls, but the master of the caravan could pass in through the small gate, a physical impossibility to his camels, and seek lodgings in the city. Lincoln Castle... Camels? Why would he bring camels? Lincoln Castle is one of the 8 castles which it is definitely known were built by William the Conqueror, but I arrived at closing time and they shut the door on my sorrowful visage. On the high level, Lincoln is alive with crowds at night, but as you mount the steep hill, holding on to the handrail, which is there to assist you, you mount up to quiet and peace. Between the eaves of old houses, you see the massive screen of the west front and the twin towers of the great church lifted against the stars. You can think of Rome if you like, or you can think of your last journey from Lincoln, of the dead Queen Eleanor, which ended up at the Cross of Charing, or you can think of nothing but the gracious beauty that lives in these stones. Let's just have a quick gander. There was a sheriff, J.W. Pepper from James Bond. Oh, yeah, go get him. That was the sheriff. Oh, yeah, thank you very much. I don't know the east of England very well at all, says Turbo. Lincoln is the birthplace of Maggie Well Grantham. Maggie Well Grantham? Do you mean, what, Margaret Thatcher? Turbo, no, nor me. The North and the West and Midlands know them very well, but the East and the South is a mystery. Phone is ringing. Hello, Mr. Suggett. Hello? Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
So weird happened there. I don't know what.
Well, not only can I hear you, but all my lovely viewers.
Oh, of course, you were. Oh, I timed it wrong again. Sorry.
It's all right. Are you around in half an hour? I'll give you a call back.
Yeah, no problem.
All righty. I'll ring you then.
Okay, cool.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.
He never remembers. Mr. Suggett, good old dear Mr. Suggett from the Veg Grower podcast. He only rang up so that I would mention his name and his podcast and say go and have a listen to it. That's really all that is. I know what he's like. I'll ring him a bit later on. Oh, mystery caller. Yes, ubiquitous Mr. Suggett strikes again. I know. Bless his little socks of cottonness. That's what I say. I need to sort this bloody light out because it's a pain. The lights are right in front of me. Normally, as I said before, I have a light here which makes it far easier to read. I discovered that and I didn't reset it, which is why I'm struggling to get the light on the book. I wonder if I do this. Sorry about this. I'm going to try this. Here we go. So doing it slightly to the side. Good old Mr. Suggestion. Good old Mr. Suggestion. Anyway. A man who loves the rounded contour of the West Country is at first inclined to dislike the flat monotony of the Lincolnshire fens. His eye looks round vainly for landmarks. There is nothing on which to focus. The flat land runs to the sky on all sides, and the presence of the sea is over the moving corn. Gradually, however, the peculiar atmosphere of the country grips the imagination, the slightest eminence becoming important. A windmill or a tall tree occupies the eyes, and the flight of birds is marvellous against the sky. As in all flat countries, the clouds billow splendidly over the rim of the earth, and you find the greatest beauty in the changing heavens. The third part, or riding, of Lincolnshire is called Holland, and no district in England has been more justly named. I was heading for Holland when, standing up about 10 miles away, I saw a curious tower among the fields. "That's the Boston Stump," said a man in a cornfield. "And what is the Boston Stamp?" I asked. "It's the Boston Stamp," he replied, and added, "thickhead," with his eyes. So, feeling that there was no point in provoking him further, I slid off along the level way. Boston? In Holland? As I drew near the stump, it proved to be the tower of a fine old Dutch church standing on the brink of a slow canal-like river. In a few moments I entered the cobbled streets of a town which, like Bradford-on-Avon in Wiltshire, bears the stamp of the foreign trader. If England contains any homesick Dutchman, I recommend him to spend his weekends at Boston. Boston today is an interesting study. It's typical of the great town that has come down in the world. Like many an aristocrat, it manages to carry on bravely so that, unless you knew of its past grandeur, there would be nothing remarkable about its present condition. In the Middle Ages, Boston was the Bristol of the East Coast. There was no greater port in England, except London. The decline began with the Black Death, which decimated the eastern counties. The sea broke through the dykes, Boston Harbour silted, and the final blow was delivered by the gradual shifting of the commercial balance from east to west coast, with the development of trade with the Americas. Boston at this time contributed to the very cause of her ellipse. Her men her men helped to found Boston, New England, and now, by one of the queer tricks of time, the citizens of the famous Boston Mass roam the quiet streets of the little-known English Boston. Sorry, I'll read that last bit because I got a bit lost there. Her men helped to found Boston, New England, and now, by one of the queer tricks of time, the citizens of the famous Boston Mass roam the quiet streets of the little-known English Boston, commenting on its quaintness. When I wrote about Beaulieu Abbey in the New Forest, I wondered whether an atmosphere of sanctuary could cling to an apparent dead ruin. And now in Boston, I wonder whether an atmosphere of trade could cling to a town, rising superior to the buffeting of economic and geographical changes. Why not? Nothing dies harder than a street market. Boston today, a town of 16,100 people, is not a sleepy old ruin. Its docks are still busy. They were unloading continental coal when I walked round them. Also fish, which they sell most appropriately by Dutch auction. In the square I encountered one of the most melancholy markets I've ever seen. It's known locally as Bug Row, and the central aisle is, I understand, Flea Walk. Old iron bedsteads, bent and battered beneath the weight of heavy sleepers, rested on the cobbles, a woebegone sight. Ancient perambulators stood in a miserable row. Bits of wood, saved from the demolition of houses, were stacked in little piles to be sold for firewood. There were a few books on stalls, piles of old iron, decayed bicycles. Purchasers sat on creaking bedsteads trying to work the shutters of doubtful cameras. All the small dealers try to raise a few shillings in Bug Row once a week, explained a native Bostonian. But you ought to see the real market day when the farmers and the corn merchants come in. A man tried to sell me a bag of bed knobs. I've been wondering why ever since. 3 of those prim, sallow, enthusiastic, middle-aged lovers of England, in which Boston Massachusetts seems to specialise, was standing in the cells of the Guild Hall, regarding moistly the bare rooms in which the Brewster and other Pilgrim Fathers were imprisoned after their attempted flight from England in 1607. Boston's greatest experience is, however, the long climb up the stump, the tower of one of the largest parish churches in England. There are 7 doors to the church, representing the days of the week, 12 pillars in the nave, representing, yes, the months of the year, 24 steps to the library, representing, you've guessed it, the hours of the day, and 52 windows, representing the weeks in the year, 60 steps to the chancel floor, representing the seconds in a minute, and 365 steps to the 275-foot high stump, representing days in a year. I didn't know that. I didn't know there was all that time that was put into Boston stump, the church. As you wind round and round in the narrow stone tube, it seems like these steps have been As you wind round and round in a narrow stone tube, it seems that these steps have been much underestimated. On the way up, 2 or 3 spirals in pitch darkness. Now and then a voice with a nice Boston, Massachusetts purrs in it with what purr in echoes from above. Say, are you coming up? Well, I'm resting round the corner. No idea if that's Boston, Massachusetts, by the way. You wait, for there's no room to pass, till the sound of weary footsteps ascending warns you that the stone corkscrew is clear. On top of Boston's stump, I discover, of course, Gracie and Mother and the Professor from Boston, Massachusetts, gazing acutely over the Flemish landscape, trying to pick out the towers of Lincoln Cathedral, which, on a good day, you can see far off on the skyline. Far below, small boys playing by the slow green-brown river cup their hands to their mouths and shout, "Throw down a penny, mister!" Someone does this. The coin spins out into a great curve and falls with such a terrific thud on the grass that no one dares to repeat the act in case it lands on the head of the urchin and kills him. "Boston," whispers Gracie, looking down on the little town with its huddled roofs, its great square and its river. "I'm glad we've seen it," says the Professor. "Isn't it time for tea?" suggests the Mother. Boston? Tea? It's a funny thing to hear on Boston's stump. I smile and pretend to find Lincoln. "Say, Daddy, it'll be here in a minute." Click goes Gracie's camera. In a few minutes, the feet of Boston, Massachusetts, awaken to the echoes of the dark stairs of the church in which men prayed for and received a new England. Lots of chatter going on. St. Botolph's Church is a parish church in the Church of England in Boston, Lincolnshire. Its tower is 266 feet 9 inches tall. Has been nicknamed the Boston Stump since its construction. 266 9 inches. He says it's 275 inches, doesn't he? Thickhead. Not heard that. Yeah, thickhead. All right, thickhead. Lovely, lovely term. I think a few thick ears liberally administered around the world would be a good thing. I think you're right, Audrey. In my day, boys got the slipper, girls got the ruler. Quite right. I'm with you, Audrey, says Morton. The police are allowed to administer minor corporal punishment in the street. We only have one of the lowest levels of street crime. And it says it all. Absolutely. Even the youngest vandals know they can't touch me, says Audrey. I know, it's a shame, isn't it? It is a shame. Sorry, I've got a bit of a watery eye. Watery eye? Pug. Pug in the eye. He was sitting in the hotel lounge with a guidebook looking grim. I suppose a deceptive friendliness about me appealed to him, for he began almost at once. "Say," he said, "would you have any objection to answering a few questions? Bully, that's really good of you. Waiter, 2 dry martinis. Now, see here, I guess I've hit it wrong. I've been through Lincoln..." Oh, is he another American? Seems to get a lot of Americans in this book. "Now, look here, I guess I've hit the wrong town. I've been through Lincolnshire and Gloucestershire and Worcestershire and what the hell? Oh, yeah, Herefordshire. And I've seen every darn cathedral in that bunch. Now, this Petersburg Cathedral, I kind of feel it's just a repetition of all the others, and that means that I've just wasted another day. Maybe I should have gone right on to Ely." I tried to sum him up and failed. You didn't get the massive strength of the Norman's nave here?" "No, sir. I guess I saw it done better in Gloucestershire," he replied dogmatically. "Or the most unusual Norman apse of one of the glories of Peterborough, or the remarkable West Front, which has been called the finest portico in Europe." "Go slow," he suddenly cried. "The most what? The most unusual what?" He brought out a notebook and a gold pencil and began to write. "I like to keep my diary up to date," he said with a friendly smile. "Put it in then," I suggested. The story of these cathedrals. Men didn't just arrive with cartloads of stones and start to build a church. There's a story of faith and struggle behind every every English cathedral. Behind Peterborough is a love story, an old story of a heathen Saxon prince called Peder. And don't tell me she was called Thyle. No, Peder, is it Peder? Who was in love with a princess called Athelelda. Oh gosh, these names put me right off. Well, never mind, they were real honest to God's people. This girl promised to marry the prince if he became a Christian. Many a time a woman of influence converted an early Saxon kingdom, you know. The prince consented, the conversion of Mercia followed, and eventually men built a church on the site of the present cathedral. He made a few rapid notes in his book. Was that before William the Conqueror? He asked. Waiter, I replied. Two more very dry martinis. I settled down to find out why this man had crossed the Atlantic. Yeah, good point. Now and then there crops up in the vast army of cultured and intelligent American travellers, and no one respects the average American traveller more than I do, a man who drifts at great expense through Europe like a ship without a rudder. I've often wondered why. I ventured to ask him, and he was frankness itself. See here, I'll tell you, he called, pulling up his chair nearer. I made a whale of a success back home. I'm vice president of such and such corporation, and only 6 years since I was a junior in an engineering firm in a bum outfit in Kentucky. Well, I tell you, sir, things are different for me now. I got to go to parties and dinners and all that. I soon rumbled that if I was going to win out in my job, I ought to go and join in on the conversation. I got to see Europe. I got to stick. I got to see Europe. I just got sick of sitting around listening to a pack of fool women talking about Rome and Florence and Stratford-upon-Avon and all that bunk. Believe me, sir, a guy who hasn't seen these places, it cuts no ice. I began to like this man. His sturdy honesty of purpose was sublime. Sir, I said, you came over? Yep. I took 5 weeks vacation, spent 2 weeks on the water and 3 to see Europe in, and gee, I've just busted around some. I've seen Rome and Venice and Florence and Naples and Paris and Stratford-on-Avon and all the darn cathedrals, and, well, I guess I'll be able to put 'em all over when I get back. You bet I will. But surely, I suggested, it would have been better and cheaper to have bought some books and stayed at home. No, sir, it ain't the same as travel. You got to go right through with it. Say, do you know London? They do me a real... Do you know London? Then do me a real service if you could tell me how I can see London in a day. They're so typical of Americans, I suppose. I don't know, have we got any Americans watching? That it's like, just quickly, do it in a day, get it round, get down, just do on the bus, go on the tour bus. I took him to the cathedral. I tried to explain, leaving out all the architecture, that these great churches are the urns which hold the ashes of England's history. The dim aisles are sacred to a past which is the splendid mother of the present. For in them are gathered the men whose lives, shaped through stress and storm, through the dense drive of arrows and smoke of conflict, through the war of words, and through victories and defeats and losses, more magnificent than gains, the destiny of English people. We stood beside the grave of a queen, one of the most unhappiest women in history, whose dignified life and character must win more than admiration from all men, Catherine of Aragon, wife of Henry VIII. This tomb is passed by most visitors. It's covered by a marble stone inscribed by the Catherines of England. Every complex misery which can torture an unhappy wife befell this poor lonely lady, a miserable pawn in a political game, a woman whose staunch life was broken on the diplomatic wheel by the humiliated member of an important triangle, Henry, Catherine, Anne Boleyn. I love everything that history tells about her. It was she who, when Henry was abroad and James IV of Scotland decided to invade England, rallied the troops and addressed them before they marched north to win the Battle of Flodden Field. Within a year, Henry VIII was deep in plot to divorce her. No matter how one realises Henry's need for a male issue, the insults and the humiliations piled on this loyal and able woman must always be one of the most shameful chapters in the domestic history of English throne. When she died, worn out with sorrow and illness, to the unconcealed delight of Henry and Anne Boleyn, the king, in selecting Peterborough as her burial place, said that he gave her the handsomest tomb in England. If his bulky ghost haunts these isles now, I hope it feels ashamed of that poor, quiet, forgotten grave. Unhappy Catherine deserves a more queenly tomb. Peterborough is sacred also to the memory of another ill-starred woman, Mary, Queen of Scots. Her grave was prepared by a man called Old Scarlet, who over half a century before had prepared the grave of Catherine of Aragon. When James I came to the throne, he ordered the removal of his mother's body from Peterborough to Westminster Abbey. "Well," said the American, "no wonder you folks get so much out of these cathedrals of yours. It's the family history skeletons and all. Say, Henry VIII, wasn't he that fat guy with the ginger whiskers? Well, those poor wives." Mary, Queen of Scots, wasn't... "Oh, yeah, I guess I knew that," he cried. Those poor wives of his certainly stood for a lot, and he was no beauty to look at, but then women seem to like the ugly slobs, don't they?" "Have you," I said, "gathered anything this afternoon to put over on them at home?" "Sure," he said, "you better have." "Then this day has not been wasted." He caught the late train to London, and I can see him as plainly as anything in a week's time, shaving before dressing for dinner for a dinner party, with his diary propped up on the bathroom ledge open at Peterborough. "I guess I'll put that one over them tonight. That'll knock 'em for a row of cans." Well, I certainly hope it does. That was it. That was interesting, wasn't it? That was interesting. We've got page and a half. Let's just plough on because we're going to get to the end of the chapter. 2 pages. We get to chapter... Wait a minute. I thought this was chapter 9. It's now chapter 11. Was that chapter 10? I think it was. Am I the only person I've ever known who has been to Rutland? Do you remember Rutland TV? Rutland Weekend Television, I think it was called. I admit that I have known men who have passed through Rutland in search of a fox. I have never met a man who has deliberately set out to go to Rutland, and I don't suppose you have. Rutland, which I believe most people think is in Wales, is the smallest county in England and the most remarkable. It's only 17 miles long and 17 miles wide, and it contains only 2 towns, Oakham and Uppingham, neither large enough to be a municipal borough. The county of Rutland, nestling like a baby in arms between Lincolnshire, Leicestershire and Northamptonshire, is included in the Shires, Rutland is the only shire carved out of old Saxon Mercia not named after its county town. Otherwise, we would know it as Oakhamshire. On the other hand, no one would dream of calling it Rutlandshire. Tiny Rutland is the only example of an ancient Mercian division which has survived the West Saxon shiring of the district. Throughout history, Rutland seems to have been a kind of birthday present to queens or the favour of kings. Ethelred gave it to his Queen Emma. Edward the Confessor gave it to his Queen Edith. John gave it to Isabella. If happiness is the absence of history, then Rutland is the happiest county in England, for the only bloody chapter in its annals is one battle, which I suppose just drifted untidily over the neat border into quiet but hapless Rutland. I suppose they tried to shoo it back over the border as they might do with a flock of geese. I'm sorry about this. It's history. I'm sorry about this. It is history's blunder. If this battle had not trespassed, we might have called Rutland the Arcady of England. I went on past fine fields of wheat and oats, a lovely rich gold county. No factory chimneys deform the rolling corn or break the gentle sweep of fields. Industries have sprung up in Rutland and have expired. There is something old-fashioned in the air here, I think, not congenial to the hurly-burly of modern life. Stone is quarried at Ketton, where about 150 men are employed. St Dunstan's Church in Fleet Street is built of Ketton stone, and there is some, I seem to remember, in the Tower of London. The villages of Rutland are delicious. Everything in this county is to scale. A Rutland village consists of church, vicarage, shoeing forge, whatever that is. Just a forge, a blacksmith's forge, isn't it? The Saracen's Head, 20 white cottages with neat pigsties behind them, and a village pump. I believe the last smock was seen in Rutland. "Where are we?" I asked. "Tickencote," said a shy little girl who was swinging on a gate. If ever you are near Tickencote, look at this pocket edition of a Norman church. I stood in the shady churchyard and thought that this little building, planted in this lovely soil soon after the Conquest, is one of the fairest things I have seen. The vaulted chancel is a marvel, but the most remarkable feature is the quintuple Norman chancel arch. There is nothing, I am aware of it, like in all of England. The arch resembles 5 huge decorated stone horseshoes placed one within the other. I compared it to horseshoes because horseshoes are somehow symbolic of Rutland. You hear them on the roads. You see the sparks from anvils spurting in the dark forges and the county towns. Oakham contains more distinguished horseshoes than any other place on earth, but I am coming to that in a minute. Oakham, the county town, looks like a village. The stocks are in the position under the circular butter cross. There are thatched houses in the main street. I slowed down till my car ran silently over the road, for the 3,500 inhabitants of Oakham, I think, were asleep. What 2,000 years or so had failed to do, I had no intention of doing. A buxom wench with a face like a ripe pippin and a waist made for the arm of an 18th century gallant gave me beer and beef in a room hung with fox masks. "What do you do here?" I asked. "Nothing till the hunting begins," she said, blushing from the ears up. Fancy watching a girl blush. I look round the room at pictures of horsemen taking fences, falling into ponds, hounds in full cry, hounds fresh, hounds weary. A retriever came in and placed a little black iced sponge of a nose in my hand. Nothing happens here. Oh, yes. Sorry, nothing happens here? Oh, yes, sir, the Prince of Wales, he hunts here. I went out into the yard and through a great arch which was built to admit coaches. The most interesting object in this sleepy, happy, delicious county town is Oakham Castle, one of the finest examples of Norman domestic architecture left in England. Here they hold the assizes twice a week, and the judge is almost certain to receive a pair of white gloves, for no one commits a crime in Rutland. The Norman Hall is hung with horseshoes, some of ordinary size and some beaten out over 7 feet long with strips of metal. Every time a peer passes through Oakham, he has to give a horseshoe to the castle. If he refuses, the people of Oakham have the right to take one from his horse. I suppose if a modern peer refused it, it would be legal for them to stick a nail in his tyres and serve him right. This custom is lost in the mists of antiquity. It is, by some, said to have originated in Norman times, when the Wakelin de Ferrier, master of the horse to the conqueror, held Oakham Castle. Others place the custom to a later date. Many kings and queens have paid the horseshoe tax. The two latest come from the King and the Duke of York, who had passed through Oakham when hunting. Queen Victoria, Queen Alexandra, and King Edward VII are represented. One of the largest shoes was given by Queen Elizabeth. The shoe was given by George IV. The shoe given by George IV is of solid bronze, and it stands 7 feet high and is said to have cost £50. The tragedy of Oakham Castle is that George V never paid the tax. "If only we could have got him," said the caretaker to me. "I believe he passed through on the railway once, but that doesn't count. When the king came here as the Prince of Wales, he looked round and said, 'Where's father's?'" It is curious that while kings have been given shoes to Oakham, the little stone quarrying village of Ketton, nearby, has for centuries been giving shoes to queens. This village still pays an annual rent of a few shillings to the Crown to provide the Queen with leggings. This, I imagine, a survival from the remote Saxon times, when Rutland was generally assigned to the Queen. I smiled to myself as I ran towards the Rutland boundary. I have found England 100 times since I started, and here it was again. In all of England, is there anything quite like old... Sorry, I'm obviously very tired because I'm cocking this up, nobody's business, but we've got 2 paragraphs to go, so we will get to the end. In all England, is there anything quite so old English as a county town where the fox is the chief industry, where the thatch the main street, tax piers, goes to sleep in the afternoon, burn wood, never see charabancs or factory smoke, never, as far as I can find out, murder each other, and where the girls, when you ask them a question, look down at the floor and go red around the ears? Some day I will go to live in Rutland in a pink coat and drink a bottle of port every night. And the subtle compliment they pay one in Oakham. After showing me the result of taxing peers for centuries, the caretaker looked up and said with a roguish smile, "And may we expect another one, sir?" I stopped at the boundary, where I stood up and took off a hat that was a new... What? I stopped at the boundary. It's always the last bloody sentence that I cock up. I don't understand why. It's because I know I'm coming to the end. I stopped at the boundary, where I stood up and took off a hat that was once new to the rich gold fields of Rutland. No idea what it meant. No idea. Anyway, there we go. That was chapter 10. We're on chapter 11, and we've made it within the hour. Whew, a right gallop at the end. Sorry about cocking it up towards the end. They obviously get very tired towards the end. 45 minutes is a good time. An hour is just too much for me. I believe Rutland water is man-made. Is it? Passed by the management, no doubt. I went there on a bikini holiday, says the lovely Julia. As a biking holiday, not a bikini holiday. That's wishful thinking. I couldn't remember where, but Rutland was ringing bells in my head. There we go. Yes, man-made as a reservoir, but they managed to keep the church. Julia, it's a lovely place, and you can nudge it over to Lincolnshire. Leicestershire. I can't read. Anyway, there we go. Sorry about that. I'm going to bring up Mr. Suggett and find out what he wants. Love the reading, especially the part with the cashier. A cashier with imagination ends up in prison. Yeah, that's like most jobs. The coat of arms has horseshoes and acorns in it. Anyway, it's Thursday today, so Friday tomorrow, the final reading for the week. And then one more week of readings. We may, well, it's possible, because then I'm away the following week. I will not be in Rutland, unfortunately. Anyway, thank you for watching. Take care, look after yourselves, and I will talk to you very soon. We've got a lovely video for you tomorrow, which I went out and filmed today in Stenning, but with, well, with rifles. That's all I'm going to say. Not trifles, but rifles. Till next time, thanks for watching.